Beyond the Tiffin city limits, Seneca County is peppered with small villages, and small villages remember things strangely. Not always in monuments or museums, sometimes in fragments. A name carved into a stone, an old newspaper folded into a courthouse archive, a story told enough times that nobody remembers where they first heard it. This is one of those stories. So settle in and bring a shovel. Today, we're going hunting for a grave robber. Just east of Tiffin, somewhere north of the village of Attica, hidden among the cemeteries and fields of Seneca County, rests one of the darkest forgotten stories in Ohio history. The story of Belle Bowen, an 18-year-old girl whose body was stolen from her grave in 1886. Today, we're going to try to retrace what may have happened to her. In the 1880s, Attica was not the quiet village we see today. It was a railroad town. The tracks running through here connected rural northwest Ohio to larger cities like Cleveland, Toledo, Columbus, and Chicago. Freight moved constantly through these lines: lumber, grain, livestock, and coal. And people. By the late 19th century, railroads had become the bloodstream of America. But railroads also carried things people preferred not to talk about, including bodies. During the 1800s, medical schools across America faced a problem. They needed cadavers for anatomical study. But legal bodies were difficult to obtain, so a black market emerged. Grave robbers, sometimes called resurrectionists, supplied corpses to medical institutions for cash. Fresh graves were the most valuable, especially young bodies, especially rural graves where security was minimal. And in September of 1886, near the tiny settlement of Omar, north of Attica, 18-year-old Belle Bowen died of consumption. Tuberculosis haunted 19th century America. Entire families watched loved ones slowly fade away from it. By the time Belle died, her family had likely already been grieving for months. Most grave robberies in the 19th century followed a similar pattern. The thieves watched local obituaries and funerals carefully. They targeted recent burials because decomposition reduced the body's value quickly, and timing mattered. A body stolen within the first few nights after burial could be transported by rail before anyone discovered the grave had been disturbed. The man most directly connected to the theft of Belle Bowen's body was Martin E. Wilson, a medical student from the Attica area. Evidence at the time suggested he exhumed her body the very night after her burial in September of 1886. Another man, Dr. H.G. Blaine, was arrested as well because Wilson has ties to him and reportedly borrowed his horse and buggy during the operation. Blaine was Belle's family doctor and knew the Bowen family personally, which made the scandal explode across northwest Ohio. But Blaine was later acquitted of the involvement. The reason Belle's body was stolen was almost certainly medical cadaver trafficking. That sounds shocking now, but in 1886 it was part of a grim underground industry surrounding medical schools. Anatomy programs desperately needed human bodies for surgical training and dissection, yet legal cadavers were scarce. So the black market emerged, and our story unfolded. And tuberculosis victims were often considered desirable for anatomical study because the disease left the body thin and easier to dissect. Contemporary accounts specifically note that Belle's death from consumption may have made her a deliberate target. Wilson himself appears to have been financially desperate. According to later accounts, he was poor, living with Dr. Blaine while studying medicine, and may have been offered tuition assistance for payment in exchange for supplying cadavers to the Toledo Medical College. And this is where the railroad becomes crucial to the narrative. The body was reportedly placed in a large trunk and shipped by rail from Bellevue towards Toledo. Wilson was arrested when he attempted to claim the trunk in Toledo after authorities discovered the odor coming from it at the station. So the likely chain of events was, Belle died near Omar, was buried in the cemetery. Wilson digs up the body at night, transports it by wagon south towards the rail connection, loads the trunk onto the Wheeling and Lake Erie line through Bellevue. The shipment headed towards Toledo Medical College. What makes the story so haunting is not merely the crime itself, but how industrial and methodical it was. The railroads that connected Ohio's towns and fueled modern progress also created invisible pathways for crimes like this. A grave in rural Seneca County could be violated at midnight, and the body already halfway to a city anatomy lab by sunrise. So if Belle Bowen's body was stolen near Omar, this is probably how they moved her. Most grave robbers did not wander aimlessly through the countryside carrying corpses over long distances. They worked quickly, quietly, efficiently. A wagon could have been brought to the cemetery after dark, the coffin opened, the body removed, and transported south along rural roads towards Attica under the cover of night. In the 19th century, this was easier than we'd like to imagine. There were no electrical lights, no patrol cars, no forensic science, just darkness. Once in Attica, the body may have been loaded onto a freight shipments or baggage compartments aboard trains already leaving town before dawn. Railroad depots moved enormous amounts of cargo every day. One wooden crate among many would not necessarily attract attention. In larger cities, medical intermediaries often handled the exchange. Some grave robbers worked independently. Others were tied to organized networks supplying anatomy schools throughout the Midwest. And somewhere inside all of this machinery of profit and medicine was an 18-year-old girl from Seneca County whose family believed she had finally been laid to rest. This is where the story stops being historical and becomes personal. No matter how much time passes, there is still something deeply unsettling about standing where this happened. Because this is not folklore, not fiction, not a ghost story invented around a campfire. Someone really came here. Someone really opened that grave. And someone really carried Belle Bowen away into darkness. The railroad made 19th century American modern. It connected towns, built fortunes, moved industry across entire states. But sometimes history leaves strange shadows attached to progress. Because the same rails carrying passengers home to their family could also carry stolen bodies north to the anatomy labs in cities. Today, the trains still pass through Attica. Most people never think about what once traveled these rails after midnight. But in September of 1886, somewhere between this cemetery and those railroad tracks, Belle Bowen disappeared from the grave her family had entrusted her to. Wilson eventually served only a brief prison sentence for stealing Belle's body. Afterward, he completed medical school, became a respected physician in Bettsville, held public offices, helped found a bank, and died decades later at a patient's bedside in 1925. And now, more than a century later, Belle joins the growing community of spirits that still wander Seneca County today. Just on the other side of the veil, comfortably resting between the pages of an entirely new story.